cells stop producing energy for life. Recent studies have shown that mitochondria are particularly vulnerable to the effects of nanoplastic, and that's where a cascade of processes leading to aging and disease begins. Scientists from China have discovered that the electrostatic charge and tiny size of nanoplastic particles allow them to penetrate deep into the cell and accumulate even within mitochondria, disrupting their function. Such a condition is known as mitochondrial dysfunction, a state in which mitochondria can no longer perform their essential roles. For comparison, a mitochondrion is approximately the size of a bacterium, while a nanoplastic particle is dozens of times smaller. Dr. Jeffrey Long, a radiation oncologist with many years of clinical experience and an expert on environmental exposures and their impact on human health, explains the destructive intracellular processes triggered by nanoplastic.
They can get into the cell and they can damage the critical parts of the cell, particularly mitochondria. Mitochondria in each cell in the human body is sort of the energy machine. It produces the raw stuff that provides energy to the entire rest of the cell. And it is frightening to understand, and increasingly so with increasing scientific studies, that nanoparticles at nanoplastics, as they get in, are actually damaging the mitochondria, that energy-producing part of the cell. They're also damaging the part of the cell involved in division and reproduction called DNA. And certainly they can affect other molecules and proteins within the cell.
Mitochondria are the cell's energy and signaling center. They regulate metabolism, control cell growth and division, protect against oxidative stress, modulate inflammation and immune responses, and trigger programmed cell death. One of their key functions is cellular respiration, the process by which energy is produced. Energy in the human body is generated as follows. First, proteins, fats, and carbohydrates from food are broken down into simple molecules. These molecules then enter the mitochondria, where electrons are extracted from them. The electrons move along a specialized chain of proteins, much like an electric current passing through wires. This electron flow drives the mitochondrial energy machinery, resulting in the production of ATP, the universal fuel that powers all organs and tissues. A single mitochondrion can produce up to 10 million molecules of ATP per day. However, electrostatically charged nanoplastic interferes with this delicate process. Its particles disrupt movement of electrons and reduce the efficiency of ATP synthesis. It is similar to a power plant where the wiring begins to short circuit. The generator falters, energy output drops, and the entire system starts to fail more quickly. Mitochondria have their own DNA, a set of instructions for energy production. Without it, mitochondria cannot generate energy, and the cell gradually loses its power source and begins to deteriorate. Exposure to nanoplastic causes mutations to accumulate rapidly in mitochondrial DNA, further impairing mitochondrial function. Studies published in 2023 demonstrated that 50 nanometer polystyrene nanoparticles sharply reduce ATP production and increase the number of mutations in mitochondrial DNA.
We have studies on this, with dramatic images taken using a scanning electron microscope, as well as a transmission one, where you can actually see plastic destroying the mitochondria, the structures that produce a cell's energy.
Chronic exposure to nanoplastic turns cells into a battlefield. Their electrostatic charge prevents mitochondria from carrying out their essential functions, and this disruption marks the beginning of the slow decline of cells, tissues, and organs. We have now seen the key mechanisms by which charged nanoplastic particles damage cells. Each of these processes is destructive on their own, but they also occur simultaneously and amplify one another's effects. This chain reaction unleashes avalanche of damages leading to cell death, and ultimately causing systemic breakdowns and accelerating biological aging.
Micro and nanoplastics accelerate aging. We tend to think that aging begins with wrinkles, gray hair, or fatigue. But in reality, it starts deep within the cells, with mitochondrial dysfunction and failures in key biological processes. Over time, damaged and dying cells accumulate, and the body loses its ability to renew itself. Aging is the gradual wear and tear of life's internal mechanisms. Scientists identify several main mechanisms of aging, such as oxidative stress, mitochondrial dysfunction, chronic inflammation, telomere shortening, DNA damage accumulation, epigenetic alterations. These same mechanisms underlie various diseases. When mitochondria can no longer produce sufficient energy, when DNA damage accumulates, and when inflammation becomes chronic, the organism grows increasingly vulnerable. This is when conditions such as diabetes, cancer, heart attack, dementia, and Alzheimer's disease begin to develop, and they all share one root cause: the aging of cells and tissues. Here's the crucial point. Electrostatically charged nanoplastic induces the same processes: oxidative stress, DNA damage, mitochondrial dysfunction, telomere shortening, chronic inflammation, and epigenetic alterations. Thus, electrostatically charged nanoplastic artificially accelerates cellular aging. What once unfolded over decades can now progress many times faster under its influence. And we are already witnessing the consequences. Diseases are becoming younger. Scientists have found that modern generations develop illnesses earlier and accumulate more chronic conditions than their parents did at the same age. Even a difference of just a few years now translates into noticeably higher rates of disease. Cancer and hypertension remain the most common conditions. Moreover, each subsequent generation shows an increase in the number of chronic conditions in a single individual. Diseases once considered age-related are increasingly found in young people. Notably, this trend coincides with the growing plastic pollution of the environment. As a result of exposure to electrostatically charged nanoplastic, the biological cell age of people in their 20s or 30s may already correspond to that of a 50 to 60-year-old person.
So very frightening how widespread nanoplastics are everywhere. Probably each and every one of our cells, even to you talking and among the audience listening, probably all of our cells have at least some nanoplastics.
So let's summarize. Aging is a gradual breakdown of the cells in our bodies. Nanoplastics accelerate this deterioration, and thus the aging itself through all those destructive processes within the cells that we've just talked about. And here lies the crucial point. The same mechanisms that drive aging also underlie many chronic diseases. In other words, micro and nanoplastics not only speed up aging, but also contribute to the development of diseases. Today, micro and nanoplastics are detected in every organ of the human body, and everywhere, in each organ, in each cell. The tiny plastic particles trigger a cascade of internal destruction. Nanoplastics damage cell membranes, disrupt ion channels, induce oxidative stress, disable mitochondria, and provoke genetic mutations. These damages affect all cell types in the same way, whether in the heart, bones, lungs, or elsewhere. Now, we know the answer to the main question that began our investigation. Why and by what mechanism are nanoplastics capable of destroying living systems at the microscopic level? But what does that mean to us, for each of us? What specific diseases arise from such cellular destruction within the human body? The answers lie ahead in the next part of our investigation.
Micro and nanoplastics are damaging health. Micro and nanoplastics impact the nervous system.
Neurological disorders are the leading cause of physical and cognitive disability worldwide, affecting almost 3.5 billion people. Over the past 30 years, the number of such cases has risen drastically, and scientists project that within the next 2 decades, this figure could double. Since this trend mirrors a surge of plastic pollutions in our environment, it becomes clear why these diseases are becoming more prevalent and why they're increasingly affecting younger population. Now, recall the image of a plastic spoon in the brain. Unfortunately, it doesn't sit there inert or harmless. Electrostatically charged plastic particles attack neurons, the brain cells that are responsible for most of our thoughts and movements. Every day and every minute, nanoplastics are silently destroying cells in our brains, and the exposure to these tiny plastics, they never stop. In fact, it continues to accelerate. Consequently, the damage of our neurons lead to severe and often irreversible diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, epilepsy, stroke, and many others. But neurons are not limited to the brain. They form an extensive network that coordinates and synchronizes the activity of the entire body. And when they're damaged, the autonomic nervous system begins to malfunction, disrupting the function of internal organs. For example, the intestines contain about 500 million neurons, often referred to as a second brain. This vast network plays a vital role in digestion, immunity, and even emotional regulation. But with every sip of water and every meal, an invisible stream of micro nanoplastics enters our bodies. And unfortunately, most of these particles settle and accumulate in the intestines.